All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we are taking a deep dive into the world of habits.
Habits, those tiny actions that add up to huge results.
And we are going to unpack the first law of behavior change.
From James Clear's Atomic Habits, we are going to figure out how to make those healthy habits obvious.
And we're going to get this deep dive started with a story about a woman who she used her intuition to save a life.
It's a pretty amazing story. It all starts at a family gathering, right? And this woman, she starts to notice something's a little off with her father-in-law.
But he insists that he feels fine.
Right, yeah. He's like, I'm fine, everything's good. But she's got this nagging feeling that something's not quite right.
And as it turns out, her intuition was spot on.
Totally spot on. She was a paramedic.
And he was having a heart attack.
Yeah, her brain, trained by years of medical experience, was probably picking up on those super subtle signs, you know?
Like what kind of signs?
A slight change in his complexion, maybe a change in his breathing, little things that most people wouldn't even notice.
It's incredible how powerful our subconscious can be.
It really is. Our brains are prediction machines. Whether we realize it or not, we're constantly picking up on cues, making judgments based on our past experiences.
So what does this have to do with habits?
Well, it's all about those cues, right? Just like that paramedic's brain was trained to recognize those subtle signals, habits rely on cues that trigger automatic responses.
So the more we repeat a behavior, the more ingrained it becomes.
Exactly. Those neural pathways get stronger and stronger, and eventually the action just becomes automatic. It's like, we go on autopilot.
Like in that story Clear shares about the retail worker who accidentally cuts up a customer's credit card.
Oh, yeah. Classic example. Out of pure habit, she just swiped it through the machine and chopped it in half. Muscle memory taking over.
I can only imagine the look on that customer's face.
Priceless, right. But it really highlights how powerful habits can be, for better or worse. And that brings us to the first law of behavior change. Make it obvious. If we want to build good habits, we need to make the cues that trigger those habits super obvious.
So we're talking about shining a spotlight on those positive actions, bringing them front and center.
Exactly. It's about taking those unconscious behaviors and making them conscious. Think about those Japanese railway workers who use pointing and calling to reduce errors.
Pointing and calling, what's that?
It's a safety technique where they literally point at something and call out what they're doing. By verbally announcing each action, they make their routine more deliberate, less prone to mistakes.
That's so interesting. So how do we apply this make it obvious principle to our own lives?
Clear suggests a simple tool called the Habits Scorecard.
Habits Scorecard, okay.
It's basically taking inventory of your day, writing down all your habits from the moment you wake up to the time you go to sleep.
So we're talking about brushing our teeth, scrolling through social media, grabbing that morning coffee.
All of it. Every little action that makes up your daily routine. And then you categorize each habit as good, bad, or neutral.
So we're getting a clear picture of where we're at.
Exactly. You start to see those autopilot behaviors that might be holding you back. And once you've identified those habits, you can start implementing strategies to change them.
Okay, so we have our habit scorecard. What's next?
Well, that's where implementation intentions come in. We'll talk about those more after the break. Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about how our surroundings, they can really shape our behavior.
In ways we might not even realize.
Yeah, it's like our environment is constantly sending us these messages.
Influencing our choices, even when we think we're in control.
Exactly. And the question then becomes, how can we kind of design our environments to encourage the habits we want?
So how can we become the architects of our own habits?
Right. And a powerful technique here involves understanding the context of our habits. Remember the story we were talking about with the paramedic and her father-in-law?
Yeah, the one where she sensed he was having a heart attack, even though he insisted he was fine.
Yeah, well, think about all the experiences that really shaped her intuition,
Years of medical training, observing patients, all of that.
Right. And over time, her brain, it linked those experiences to specific contexts.
So her brain was making predictions based on the situation she was in.
Exactly. And this same principle, it applies to our everyday habits.
So the context surrounding a behavior, it actually becomes a cue itself.
Yeah, think about something simple like drinking coffee.
Okay.
If you always have a cup of coffee while you're reading the newspaper in the morning, eventually just the act of sitting down with the paper, it can trigger a craving for coffee.
Because our brain has linked that entire sequence of events together.
That's it. The context becomes so ingrained that it acts as a cue.
This is making me think about people who say they can only work in certain environments.
Oh, yeah, like a specific coffee shop or a library.
Exactly. They've trained their brains to associate that place with focus.
The sights, the sounds, even the smells, it all becomes a cue for productivity.
So, if we want to build new habits, should we try to create completely new contexts for them?
That can be a very effective strategy. It's often easier to establish new neural pathways when you're not battling against old cues.
Makes sense. So if I want to start meditating regularly, I shouldn't try to do it in my living room where I usually watch TV.
Right, you'd be fighting against years of mental conditioning there, linking that space to relaxation and entertainment. It's better to find a fresh environment, a quiet corner in your bedroom, maybe a spot in nature, and start to create new associations.
Okay, so separate the new habit from the old context.
Exactly, and you can manipulate the context within a given space as well.
So, for example, if I want to read more, maybe I designate a specific chair in my living room as my reading chair.
There you go. By associating that chair with reading, you're creating a contextual cue.
So it signals my brain, okay, time to relax and dive into a good book.
That's it. And these small tweaks, they can make a big difference. Claire even talks about how just rearranging the furniture in your living room, something as simple as moving a chair, it can disrupt your old patterns.
And open up opportunities for new habits to emerge.
Right. It's like breaking free from those ingrained routines.
This is so interesting. It's like we have so much control over our habits if we just learn how to manipulate the context.
We really do. Now, what about those really stubborn habits?
The ones that feel impossible to break.
Well, that's where understanding the principle of friction comes in.
Friction. Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this.
So, in the context of habits, friction refers to anything that makes a behavior more difficult to perform.
Okay, so like leaving your phone in another room to avoid distractions while working,
Perfect example. You're increasing the friction associated with checking your phone.
making it less likely that I'll give in to that urge.
Right, you're putting obstacles in the path of that undesirable behavior.
So to break a bad habit, make it less convenient, less appealing.
Exactly, and on the flip side, to build a good habit, reduce the friction.
Make it as easy as possible to do the things I want to do.
Exactly, so things like, having your gym bag packed and ready to go.
Or keeping healthy snacks within easy reach.
There's seemingly small actions, they're reducing the friction.
Priming our environment for success.
And it's not about forcing ourselves to change, it's about making those positive choices the path of least resistance.
I love that idea. So we're not fighting against ourselves. We're designing a world where the things we want to do become the easiest choices.
Exactly. By understanding the power of context and friction, we can become the architects of our own habits.
This has been so insightful. It feels like we've been given this whole new toolkit for shaping our behaviors and designing the lives we want.
And remember, you have the power to make those good habits obvious, reduce the friction, create that context where those positive actions naturally emerge. It's not about willpower, it's about strategy and design.
So go out there, become the architect of your habits, and start building the life you want, one small change at a time.
Until next time, happy habit building.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today about how our environment shapes our habits.
A lot of really insightful stuff about making those good cues obvious, reducing friction, and understanding the power of context.
Yeah, like we've uncovered this hidden blueprint for habit change.
And now it's time to put it all into action, to take these strategies and apply them to our own lives.
So where do we begin? What are some practical first steps for someone who's ready to start designing their environment for success?
Well, a good place to start is to pick one specific habit that you really want to build or one you want to break.
Okay, so for example, let's say I want to start a daily meditation practice.
Perfect. So how do we make that happen?
All ears.
Well, first ask yourself, what cues can I create to make this habit more obvious?
Okay, cues.
Yeah, like maybe you designate a specific cushion in a quiet corner of your room as your meditation spot.
Gotcha. So every time I see that cushion, it's like a visual reminder, okay, time to meditate.
Exactly. You're creating a clear association between that object and the behavior.
I like it. And what about friction? How can I make it as easy as possible to actually meditate?
Well, think about any obstacles that might be in your way. Like maybe you have trouble remembering to meditate each day.
I do, all the time.
Well, in that case, you could set a reminder on your phone or even just put a sticky note on your bathroom mirror.
So I'm removing those mental barriers.
Exactly. And what about the context? If you find yourself getting distracted by noises or other activities in your house, maybe try meditating first thing in the morning before the day gets going.
So I'm creating a context where meditation is the most appealing and easiest choice.
Precisely. And as you start implementing these strategies, pay attention to what works for you and what doesn't.
Yeah, it's like becoming a scientist of my own habits, right?
Exactly. Experiment, make adjustments along the way. And remember, it's not about being perfect. There will be days when you slip up.
The key is to just keep going.
Absolutely be patient with yourself, learn from those setbacks, and keep refining your approach.
Habit change is a journey.
It is. It's about progress, not perfection. Just making those small, consistent improvements over time.
I feel so much more empowered now. Like we've been given this whole new set of tools for taking control of our habits.
And that's really what it's all about. Understanding that you have the power to design your environment, to make those good habits obvious, to reduce the friction, and to create a context where those positive actions, they just emerge naturally.
It's not about willpower. It's about strategy and design.
And most importantly, it's about taking action.
Hmm.
So go out there, become the architect of your habits, and start building the life you want, one small change at a time.
This deep dive has been fantastic. Thanks for joining us, everyone, and happy habit building.